saved by accepting. You can only save yourself by accepting grace.
Statement a couple of months ago that I found very interesting. And I don't claim to understand it, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot with it. You said that you were a cultural Christian. Okay, and so that raised a number of questions in my mind. And the first question was,
you are changing the subject.
No, I'm not. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I may be leaping outside of the topic a bit to get back to it.
We can do cultural Christianity, but I think I have a list of questions that you wanted to ask, and that is one of them. But I think Professor Dawkins did ask you...
You were referring to the predictive power and to the utility of the stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's actually what I was trying to zero in on.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that was the point. Well, it seemed to me that your proclamation that you were a cultural Christian was a recognition and a statement that you had found something in the culture that had been derived from Christianity that you had an affinity with, and that there's some reason for that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, well, what do you think that Christianity got right that allows you to make a statement like that? I mean, I know that there's differences perhaps in what we both think about the ultimate veracity of the biblical stories. Maybe there isn't differences. Like, it would take a lot of conversation to figure this out, but what did you mean by that? Like, what do you think that Christianity got right that would enable you to make a statement like that?
Virtually nothing. I meant by that no more than that I'm brought up in a Christian culture. I went to Christian schools. I therefore know my way around the Bible. I know my way around the Book of Common Prayer. I know the hymns. That's all. I don't value Christianity as a truth system at all.
Okay, so let me ask you about that, because maybe that's true and perhaps it's not. So the first question is, like, do you think that there are any marked differences between cultural traditions that would enable you to rank order them in terms of their ethical validity?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so for example, we could contrast mainstream UK Christianity with Islamic fundamentalism.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a hierarchy.
There is a hierarchy.
Okay, a hierarchy that points to what?
Well, in the case of Islam, I dislike any religion which punishes apostasy with death, that throws gay people off high buildings, that practices clitoridectomy. That seems to me to place Islam on a lower level than Christianity, but that's not to say anything very positive about Christianity.
Well, it might be to say something positive about Christianity. Like, I think that question is open, because you might ask yourself, what did Christianity get right that led it away from those particular presumptions and towards something that you regard as more ethically appropriate? Like, this isn't a trivial question.
It's a very modest claim. There's not very much. I mean, to be better than a religion that throws gay people off high buildings is not really a very virtuous achievement.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true, because if you look at the barbarism that characterizes the human past, you might think that any progression whatsoever towards something approximating mercy and tolerance is nothing short of a bloody miracle.
Well,
like, people are pretty ruthless, and so are our chimpanzee cousins.
Yes, they are.
Right. So we move forward into the light with great difficulty, and the fact that we can take that for granted.
You know what's funny is all the mystics throughout history have agreed that evolution is real, but it's backwards. So in the, from Last Common Ancestor, they say from ape turned into man, or Last Common Ancestor, right? Ape turning into man. But then the esoteric mystics throughout history, the theosophists, anthropologists, it's interesting. They say it's the other way, that man was first, consciousness was first, conscious man, and then as he's evolving to other structures and forms and stuff, and they even make an argument that the Sphinx is showing a side of evolution of man, and that they had superpowers back then, they were more clairvoyant, they had all this. But as this evolution is happening, the more beast-like men, not ape to man turned into ape.
_1 donated $5.
So,
would you ever do a meet and greet stream? Would make for good content if you tell all your soldiers to pull up somewhere.
Yeah, I would. I would do one this year. But what city, though?
Now, and that it seems self-evident and deserving of faint praise. It's not so clear to me that that's...
No, you can tell Jordan Peterson straight. but you can also tell that he's a sellout, that he understands that atheists are at the top of the power structure. He's not actually allowed to believe in Christ directly. He understands who CAA is. He understands the Jewish bracket in it, which it's not the whole thing. You know, like a lot of people say, it's just Jews at the top. It's a mixture of Jews, atheist Anglos, and evangelicals at the top. And some some Jesuits who went the wrong way, a lot. Yeah.
That's a reasonable proposition.
Okay, let's grant the
Granted
praise,
then, bro. Let's
but
go.
that has nothing to do with the truth value, and what I care about is the truth value. I see no.
I don't think there's anything funnier than Richard Dawkins. He mastered the Bible and hates it, and it's like his shadow is so large, right? You can just see like he knows everything about the Bible, and his mission is to stop it. But you know everything about it, bro. Like, that's why it's hard for me to hate him. It's just he looks a little confused to me.
no truth value in the claims of Christianity, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the miracles. Do you believe in any of those? Do you believe Jesus was born a virgin?
It depends what you mean by
As
virgin.
I said before, there are elements of the text that I don't feel qualified to comment on. My experience has been that the more, I know from a metaphorical perspective and from a mythic perspective what the story of the virgin birth means, and I accept that. I know, for example, that any culture...
He says, what is this? The Groypers are not even following the Bible, bro. Be fruitful and multiply, not be an incel. It's easy to find a wife in church, by the way. Yeah, dude, you're just being so bad faith here. Okay? I don't blame one incel on earth if they are incels. I don't blame one incel on earth for not being married. I don't blame one of them, right? Like, look at the world they've inherited. You know, they should be angry. This is like, you know, you guys see my photos and who I used to be. I was them, and I'll tell you this, man. They're right. You know, I'm a grown Chad now, I guess, so I'm on the other side of it. But there doesn't mean that I'm in the right. They're in the right. The incels are in the right. They've inherited a nasty hoe-ass world. And they read history, so no shit they're angry that the women are like this. They're reading history and seeing for thousands of years how normal the world was. They're inheriting some 70% divorce rate culture. Like, no shit that they've checked out. It makes way too much sense that they've checked out. It's actually sad that you don't see it through their lens. Like, it's so sad that you'll agree with all their takes on these hoes and this and that, and then you'll still blame them, right? And people are like, well, if you say this, that doesn't encourage them to get married and stuff. And it's like, I didn't say any of that. I'm saying they're correct at being angry at that. They're 100% correct. People only check out of society when they're that angry. And you will lose it if you can't tell your story. And you have to tell your story by having a family. So you eventually have to get over that. But man, to attacking incel culture got to be the gayest shit on earth. Because what is incel culture? They read, they're intelligent, right? They just checked out of society, that's it. What is regular Chad culture, NPC culture? They don't read, they're degenerates. Like, if you really think about it, you'll go work at a nightclub for 5 years and talk to NPC culture and Chad culture and all the Chads, and you'll hate them like me. You will hate them, bro. Right? Now, if a Chad tells me he's read, like, let's say, you know, they can only read like 48 Laws of Power, but if a Chad read a fucking book, that's cool. That's awesome. But I'm telling you, man, look how many Chads are checking out of the market, right? Yeah, they're angry. Like, I really thought going from incel to Chad, you've seen my old photos, right? I thought making the jump on this side would make me hate incels. It's like the opposite. It's the total opposite. I don't even think I'm that nerdy. I don't even think I'm like, I don't even think I could like sit down and have a beer with an incel. I'd be like, yeah, you're kind of boring, bro. But I would never look him in the eyes and say, my dude, you're totally in the wrong that you're this angry. Like, no. I get your anger 100%. Even though I'm not as angry because I get distracted, I have a life. I was you. I was you for a long time. I have months where I become you, and your anger is justified 100%. Like, it's like if I sit at a table with a bunch of chicks, you know, I don't feel proud about that. This is normal for me. But I always see some like simp in the corner, some Chad, someone who just doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to engage with the world. And he might be out with his family and something, and he'll just look at me and be like, wow, I wonder how not angry Zherka is. Or that guy sitting there. And I'm like, bro, if we could just switch shoes for a second, you'd see I'm just as angry. We're just as mad. Like, are you joking me? Yeah. Also, this be fruitful and multiply, it nowhere in the Bible does it say multiply with demons. What are you talking about? There are demons out there.
That doesn't hold the image of the woman and infant sacred dies.
Wow.
And I don't know how that needs to be expressed in a form.
True, though?
Do you mean that you don't know?
Well, let me ask you about that, because truth, this is something I talked with Sam Harris about too. Truth, as we know, is a tricky business. Do you think there are differences in the truth claims between different writers?
Zherka, do you have a sister? Are you not paying attention to this? Of course I don't have a sister. Listen to how I speak. Anyone who has a sister is gay. That's how you become soft in life, is if you grow up around like women, right? You know you're normal in life if you've been around the boys, and that's it, right? And mom, that's it. Having a sister is like, that'll make you soft, bro. What the fuck?
Dies.
And
I don't know how that needs to be expressed in a form.
True, though?
Do you mean that you don't know?
Well, let me ask you about that, because truth, this is something I talked with Sam Harris about too. Truth, as we know, is a tricky business. Do you think there are differences in the truth claims between different writers of fiction? Like, is Dostoevsky more profound than?
No, well, I wouldn't call fiction truth claims anyway. I mean, he's a...
Then on what grounds do we rank order the fiction in terms of quality? Like, Dostoevsky is a profound purveyor of fiction on the philosophical front, unbelievably deep and profound.
Yes,
There's something true about what he's writing about.
It's nothing to do with the truth that science is concerned with. The truth of science is the truth that gets us to the moon. I mean, this is nothing to do with...
He believes in the moon landing. Wow. Wow. Imagine being this intelligent and then leaking that.
Whether one writer of fiction...
By the way, it's not even been thoroughly debunked. It's been more debunked than any other topic in history. Like, they even said, as was it Buzz Aldrin said on Jimmy Kimmel or one of those shows, that it's all fake footage. You can find the clip easily.
Has a sort of insight into human nature. That goes without saying. I accept that.
Okay, so how do we deal with the notion that on the purely factual side, how do we deal with the idea? Let's take you talked about clitoridectomy. Let's talk about the oppression of women.
Yes.
We make a scientific case that that's inappropriate? Or is it a case that we're making on some other grounds? Like, I see in the Judeo-Christian tradition, one of the earliest pronouncements is that both men and women carry the image of God, both. And that
Judeo-Christian just means Christian, bro. Right? Then they started adding stuff into their Zohar and blah, 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 way later, thousands of years later. And now you have this mixture of whatever the hell Peterson's talking about.
That sets a certain tone to everything that follows. And it is a remarkable proclamation, given its radical age, that both men and women carry the image of God and are to be treated as something with intrinsic value outside of the domain of power and politics. And it isn't obvious to me, having thought about this a lot, how we deal with that in the pure realm of fact. Because one of the facts is, if I can oppress you, why the hell shouldn't I?
Yeah, my job is to keep things on track here. I think there are a number of questions which Professor Dawkins has asked quite directly that we still haven't really heard an answer to.
Okay.
Why do British people always team up with British people? Have you noticed that? Like, dude, you guys are faggots.
Professor Dawkins asking about the virgin birth. You started talking about metaphor, you started talking about myth. I think anybody listening to this conversation will understand.
You know what's interesting about myth, right? I'm not saying this is true or not. I'm saying this is what I read. Every single mystic in history, the worth his salt, said that all myths are real, that they come from reality. I'm not talking about like, in like a meta sense, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about like in the past, there was a dreamy-like in-between stage of clairvoyant vision. So sleeping was very close to death, right? Where death is very spiritual, right? And that the pantheon of gods in history were spirits. They were real, right? Although they became like demonic. Like some spirits would be neutral, some would be weak, some would be strong, some would turn into gods, but they were real. And then Christianity came and said, yo, don't worship any of those. Those are...
And that maybe a society that doesn't believe in the
And now it's still real, but it's in the invisible world, whereas before they would actually see them.
virgin birth won't work. Maybe that's the predictive power that you're talking about. But I think you must understand that when Professor Dawkins is asking you, do you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin? He means something like a biological fact. And by the way, saying I don't know, or saying, you know, I'm not qualified to comment, is an answer to that question. But is that your answer, that you don't know?
I said earlier, and I would hold to this, is that there are elements of the text that I don't know how to, that I'm incapable of fully accounting for. I can't account for what the fundamental reality and significance of the notion of the resurrection is. My knowledge just ends.
Sure, but
I know that whatever happened as a consequence of the origination and the promotion of the Christian story was powerful enough to bring Rome to its knees and demolish the pagan enterprise. So there's some power in that story that's remarkable.
Let's stick to the virgin birth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, well, the virgin birth results from a mistranslation of Isaiah. You know that.
Wow.
Like these sorts of questions, what would you say? They don't strike me as, they're not getting to the point.
I know
the
that.
story
I know
has
you
a
think
purpose.
that. Yes.
Well, and look, I understand that there's perfect reasons to debate this. I know that, and I know that your question is more than valid, but it's beside the issue as far as I'm concerned, and it's partly because, well, when we started this conversation, I said, for example, that it appears to be the case that a description of the structure through which we see the world is a story. We see the world through a story. And so that's a remarkable thing. That's a remarkable discovery, and it's emerged probably in the last 60 years in multiple disciplines, because we have to prioritize our facts. And so we prioritize them according to a particular pattern. And there are patterns that seem to work and to propagate themselves properly and to orient cultures towards life abundant. And there are other patterns, the pattern of Cain, for example, that lead to absolute bloody devastation.
Sorry,
and I don't know exactly how to construe that sort of truth. But we talked about the oppression of women, for example. It's like, how do you make a case on purely factual grounds that women should be treated as equals?
It's a moral question, and
I know that's exactly.
And I was dealing with a factual question, which is, did Jesus have a father? And you won't answer it.
Well,
it's a different kind of question.
Father and a heavenly father, like almost all mythological heroes.
So he wasn't born of a virgin then. So you're saying that Jesus was not born of a virgin?
I said, first of all, that I don't know how to mediate the fact-value dichotomy in that case. I said the same thing about the resurrection.
It's not a value. It's a simple fact. I mean, did a man have intercourse with Mary and produce Jesus? That's a factual question. It's not a value question.
You must understand what you're being asked here. That even if you think that, say, the author of the biblical texts intended much more significance than a simple scientific analysis of events, Professor Dawkins is interested in scientific truth. That's the kind of truth that he's interested in. And even if you think it's irrelevant to the point of what the gospel authors were getting at, that first needs to be clarified before you can then begin actually uncovering what the stories are about. So I think Professor Dawkins is asking from a scientific perspective, and maybe you think that scientific approach is wrong, but if you just take it for a moment, maybe this is how we find out that it is wrong. Let's take a scientific approach. Ask the question, did this occur?
I think that it's inappropriate to use a question like that to attempt to undermine the validity of the entire, what would you say, deep mythological enterprise.
Well, suppose we weren't doing that. Suppose we were asking out of interest. Suppose that we were all here devout Christians, maybe even Jungian Christians, and we thought,
oh, God,
this is interesting, over dinner. Do you think it really happened, like scientifically? Would your answer just be, I don't know?
Yes.
And you wouldn't consider it, I mean, it's not an inappropriate question to ask, just on a point of interest.
Right.
Did this really occur? And I think so often people are asking you that, and especially given the context of this conversation, we've heard everything that you're saying about metaphor and myth, but because the question is still being asked, did it really happen? You know that that's what you're being asked. And the way you just so easily said yes, I wonder why you struggle to do that in so many other circumstances.
I think because I don't look at the situation the same. The way that Dr. Dawkins and I look at the situation are really quite different, and at many, many, many levels. You know, so even on the meme question, for example, you know, like, I know the literature on the history of religious ideas. I see how these ideas have battled across millennia in a manner that is very reminiscent to me of the same sort of claim that Dr. Dawkins is putting forward with regards to meme. I know that literature. Dr. Dawkins doesn't know that literature. And it's very difficult for me to communicate from within the confines of that literature because it's extensive and deep. And we're dealing with things that we don't understand the relationship between metaphoric truth and value-predicated truth and factual truth. We don't understand that. It's a big problem. We cannot, there's no evidence whatsoever from the scientific perspective that we can orient ourselves in the world merely in consequence of the facts.
Sure.
And that's a fact. And it's a fact that's been detailed out in great detail in the last 60 years by people from a variety of different disciplines. We have to prioritize the facts. That's a value hierarchy. There may be true and false ways of prioritizing facts, but you can't determine the truth or falsehood of the way that you prioritize facts by making reference to the facts. That's a big problem.
Okay, let's talk about that as perhaps a slight detour here, because I think we do need to come back to this Christ resurrection thing. But Professor Dawkins, would you say that underlying the scientific enterprise is a fundamentally unscientific assumption? You can make scientific investigations in the world, but in order to do so, you need to choose what to prioritize. You need to choose what to investigate. You also need to value the truth. You need to have a value and a motivation for doing it in the first place. Those kinds of things cannot themselves be scientifically justified. And so does the scientific enterprise have an unscientific assumption in its space?
I suppose it does. I mean, I think that maybe just be Jordan and Richard, by the way. I think that Jordan prioritizes myth and I prioritize fact. And I think myth is kind of vaguely interesting, but it's not the be-all and end-all of my life. I think it's somewhat secondary to scientific fact, the sort of facts that tell us how old the universe is, how old the world is, the history of life, the engineering achievements of landing a spacecraft on a comet.
Oh my God. He's talking about this? Wait, lunar lander. Let's go to the moon again. Fuck the comet. Tinfoil. You know they were sponsored by, it was a new product. Tinfoil came out in like around this time and they got sponsored. That's why it was wrapped in sheets. It's fucking wrapped in sheets, bro. This is where science gets you. Wow, this is the one I would take. This one looks safer. There, this is an original photo from nasa.gov. There's tape on that thing. And parchment paper. Yeah, that is just...
These are...
That's crazy.
The things...
Jordan Peterson is a genius, you know? He's just untrustworthy. Untrustworthy genius. Let me show you something.
Shut down. It's us. Hey. Down, down, down. Go. Down. Look. Down. Hey. I pray God let me die alone before I worship by these fake niggas.